So hi there, I'm here with Andy Watt from Goldratt UK. Obviously in the UK, in Bedford, isn't it? Hi, Andy.
Yep.
And it is Bedford,
Hi,
isn't
Justin.
it, Andy? Hey, how are you doing?
It is Bedford. Yep. No, that's good. I'm very good, thanks.
Was it Bedford where we went out looking for restaurants?
It was indeed, yeah.
And we got thrown out of that
My
Michelin
hometown.
star restaurant.
I'm not sure we got thrown out, but your memory is different to mine.
Well, it's nice to have you. Nice to have you here. Before we get into the story of where we've gone together, can you start with the good news? What are you achieving today?
Okay, so today, I've cut down the number of miles that I'm doing in my car dramatically. So I'm doing many executive briefings from the office. On average, it's about 5 to 6 executive briefings a week. And from that, I've signed 4 contracts, I think, since we started, really, which was just about 4 months ago. So contracts are being signed. I'm sitting in the office rather than wasting my time in my car, and I've got a flow of executive briefings being set up for me. So everything's great, Justin, at the moment.
Okay, so let's dig into what you've achieved a little bit more, and then we'll go back and add some context. And I think that what you've achieved will be even more interesting once we have the context. But you mentioned 4 deals in 4 months. That's an average of a deal a month. Is that good or bad or terrible or fantastic?
I'd say that's probably, yeah. I mean, I've still got a lot, because we're quite early on in the process. Then there's still, by deals, I'm talking about implementation. So I've also signed 3 workshops as well, which is halfway through the process, which normally I would have signed none. So,
So if you
doing
let
workshops.
things, if you maintain the status quo, can you take a guess at what your deal flow is likely to be once the long opportunity lead time catches up with us?
Yeah, no, I'm expecting 2 a month, basically.
2 deals a month.
And in the past, it was 1 a month. So
okay.
I'm expecting double the.
Now, these deals are big. They're not small, are they?
No, they're all big deals. We're talking at least £50,000 for one deal, and it can be up to £200,000. So it's in that ballpark. So we're not talking £1,000 here or £1,000 there, no.
Yeah, so you're talking, if we assume an average of 70, we're talking about adding £140,000 a month to your revenue. Somewhere in that vicinity.
It's not quite as much as that, to be honest, because that's the total contract in a year. So it's more like adding overall in a year. I would say it's adding about £500,000.
Okay, and is that significant?
Definitely, yeah, very, very significant. I would say I've been in business since 2004, and we're probably, we have some good years and we have some not so good years, but £500,000 would be by far the best performance in all of those years. So yeah, very significant.
Excellent. So
step change difference, just.
Yeah, so to give our viewers some context, we'll come back to the story in just a moment, but let's start off with a description of your business. So your business is called Goldratt UK, which I guess would lead people to suspect you're probably a TOC consultant.
That's correct, yeah. We're TOC consultants, mainly focused in the UK market.
Excellent. And you've certainly been around the TOC. TOC, for those who don't know, stands for Theory of Constraints. We'll get into this a little bit later on. Theory of Constraints is a process improvement or an operations improvement methodology that came from Eli Goldratt, The Goal, which is a book that I guess most are familiar with. Now, you have been around since almost the beginning.
I wouldn't go that far, Justin. I'm not that old.
In the TOC world.
But yeah, more than 15. I mean, I've been in TOC consulting now since 2000, so 17 years.
Okay. And describe your business. How big? How many folks?
So we have 12 people, and we turn over approximately £1 million every year, plus or minus two. A good year would be 1.2. A bad year would be 800,000.
Okay.
But on average, over those years, it's been about $1 million.
Yeah. So the increase we talked about before is clearly significant.
It's a 50% increase, basically. I'm taking it from $1 million to $1.5 million. Yeah.
Okay, so a 50% increase in sales, and you mentioned before less work for you.
Yeah, definitely less work for me.
Well, actually, we should say less work for you.
Driving. I would say less driving.
Yeah, less work for you on an
less wasted.
Yeah, less on an opportunity by opportunity basis. Maybe more work in aggregate.
Yeah.
And less driving around.
Definitely less driving, less wasted time, massively.
Okay. So, what would you deliver for those people who haven't been exposed to TOC? What would you deliver to a typical organization, and what benefit would you bring them?
So typically there are two main things that we do. One is operational improvement. So typically we would reduce the lead time, improve the delivery performance, and increase capacity without spending any additional money, typically. And on the back of this improvement in delivery performance and lead time, we would expect increases in sales. The other implementation we do is with critical chain, which is project management, where we would typically see, again, extra capacity. So we would do more projects faster for proportionally less money, basically. That's our two offers.
Excellent. And you guys are really doing for operations what we're trying to do for sales.
Yep, absolutely. So we're very complementary.
Yeah, the same underlying methodology.
Yep.
Okay, so let's wind back now. Talk to me about how things were in sales before you started working with us, because at a glance, it would appear that you weren't that far away from where you are now. For example, you already were running promotional campaigns and giving something away.
Yeah, that was probably all we were doing, in fairness. But yeah, we ran promotional campaigns. We used an outside agency. We bought the list from them. They sent out email shots, and we gave away free copies of the Goal or free copies of Critical Chain. And after the person or persons had asked for a copy, then we created an opportunity, and hopefully we managed to follow them up. And following up meant go for a visit, a face-to-face visit. Off the back of the face-to-face visit, we would typically try to sell an implementation off the back. That was how it was. Now, the difficulty was that we had a marketing person, which is Francis, and I was the salesperson, and that was it. And we were trying to feed 10 consultants, in effect. And the problem was it was suffering from a lack of flow. So what would happen would be we'd do a campaign, we'd create 20, 30 leads off the back of that campaign. Then they would, depending on my workload, sit waiting for a phone call. I would tend to batch the phone calls. So I would sit there all day doing phone calls for perhaps a couple of weeks, in which case I'd managed to book some meetings. I'd then have travelled to the meeting, so there I could only do one meeting a day. Although the UK is not a huge country, it's still, in many cases, it's a 2-hour, 3-hour drive to the opportunity, 2 or 3 hour meeting, 2 or 3 hour drive back, day gone, one opportunity. So I'd go through all of those, then I'd basically manage to sell to 2-3 of them. And then we start the cycle again. So it's very much batch. Everything was batch. It was a campaign leading to a batch phone call, leading to batch visits, leading to hopefully some implementations. That was life as it was. when we started working with you.
Yeah, so let's not jump straight to that. So we met at TOC ICO, the annual TOC conference in Washington, I think, and over a scotch or something, or whiskey, you said, "Oh, look, we might work with you," and I think I tried to talk you out of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't say you were exactly falling over yourself to.
No, but I do remember
to work with me.
I remember being a little concerned because you were already giving away copies of the goal, and I think we'd spoken in the past, and you had, you understood, I think, what our methodology was. I'm sure you'd read the machine at some point in the past, and my concern was that I'm not sure we could bring a lot to the table here. So I said, well, maybe you don't need us, and I remember you getting a little firm with me, saying, no, I think we do. So we ran a workshop. I think myself and Alina came to Bedford. We had another workshop in Bedford, actually. So we ran a workshop with you guys and a workshop with the other group. What came out of the workshop?
So what came out of the workshop for us particularly, I think, having read the machine, and to be honest, we'd given it because you were not falling over yourself to come to the UK to work with us. I think over the Christmas period, we'd give ourselves a shot at doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
Which was taking, the machine and understanding and trying to implement it ourselves. And I think what you added from the workshop perspective was obviously a lot of your experience, and some of the mistakes that we fell into whilst trying to do it ourselves was going a bit too lower level on some of the swim lane process flow stuff. So for us, it was great to have somebody whose experience we could leverage from, rather than having to make it up on the hoof, which was extremely valuable. At the end of it, we had a very clear way forward.
So talk to me about what were the primary changes. If, as I said before, I think somebody could glance at the way things were previously and glance at the way they are now, and there are a lot of similarities. Let's try and list out some of the things that we changed as a result of that workshop.
Okay, so one of the first things we did was we hired an executive assistant for me. So we went through
So let's just make a list. We won't talk about how. So one of the things we did was we said, we don't want you doing opportunity management. It's beneficial for you to have the critical selling conversations, but let's get somebody else to manage the portfolio of opportunities and schedule your time. So I think we made a decision to hire a full-time assistant to do that for you. Okay.
That's correct.
What other changes? What other decisions did we make?
So I think one of the other big changes for us was the landing page. When we were asking people and driving people towards a free book, then if you remember in the workshop, Justin, you tore our landing page apart a little bit. It didn't show up well on mobile phones or anything like that. So big improvement there in the context of what we were actually selling, which was basically the book.
And it lacked salesmanship.
Yeah.
It didn't have a big picture of the book. It basically assumed that people were there to fill in a form and there were the fields for them. So, and also I remember you were giving people a choice of 2 books.
Yep, we give people a choice of Critical Chain or the Goal, and we ask for a whole plethora of information that would probably take them 15 minutes to fill in. So we're trying our hardest to put them off.
Yeah. So we said, no, you can only have one offer. It's either the book or the goal. It's either the goal or Critical Chain, sorry. We said the landing page has to sell, and it has to be visually appealing. We said you need to have a dedicated person who manages the opportunity flow, manages that portfolio of opportunities. What other changes did we make?
We changed the emails, and we also created email sequences. So in the past, we'd send somebody an email, do you want the book? They'd reply yes, and we'd leave them for 3 or 4 weeks, and then we'd hit them with a phone call. what we now do is we have created email sequence where we try to sell them a solution design workshop, which is our next step, rather than just warm call them. It wasn't exactly a cold call, but rather than warm call them and say, "Can I come and visit you?" So it's we changed the process.
Before, when you first spoke to a prospect after they requested the book, was your offer different from what it is now? Your first offer?
Yep, because I mean, I wouldn't say I was offering too much apart from "please can I come and visit you." I wasn't really selling an offer. I was more selling let me try and find someone who's vaguely interested, and let me see if he'll agree to meet me.
Okay, and now it's Francis. Is it Francis who follows up after someone requests the book?
After someone requests the book, we now
is that Francis?
Yeah, we now have the email sequence that.
Is that Francis who follows up?
Francis follows up with the email sequence. Yeah.
Okay, so when she follows up and she talks to someone for the first time, what's she offering at in that first conversation?
So we're offering a solution design workshop rather than a full-blown implementation. So we're going down the workshop route essentially.
But is Francis your EA?
No, Francis is a marketing person.
Oh, so what's the name of your
Paul's
EA?
EA.
Paul.
Yep, Paul.
Okay, so when Paul first talks to a prospect, he's not selling up to a solution design workshop. You do that. What's his pitch on the phone?
No, he's selling an executive briefing. He's selling an executive briefing with me, which is a 40-minute conversation where we find out a bit about their business and how we could apply either the goal or critical chain principles to it to help improve it. Really, that's what we're offering.
Okay, so if we kind of move now to what you have going there, the first step is you run at the moment email campaigns offering people a free copy of the goal. That's step one.
Correct.
And then step two, Paul will follow up respondents, which is people who've clicked through to the landing page and requested the goal. He'll follow those people up and he'll offer them an executive briefing with yourself.
Correct.
And then you do the executive briefing and sell up to a solution design workshop?
Yeah, and I think the important thing to mention, an executive briefing is a telephone call or a Skype call, but most of the time it's a telephone call with Microsoft PowerPoint presentation online. That's what it is. So there's no more traveling for me, which is good.
That's very nice. And then you sell up to the solution design workshop, which is, and for that you're on site with the consultant who you intend to allocate to the engagement, I'm guessing.
Yes, that's correct. And it's normally a 2-day workshop, solution design workshop.
So you're in the process of, I guess it's fair to say, reducing your travel to just the solution design workshop prior to the engagement starting.
Yep.
Which is the same as our model here at Ballistics.
Yep.
So what sort of impact has that had on your capacity across the board?
Well, a massive impact. I think it's not just to mention capacity, because I think that's important, but also flow is very important. So some of these opportunities we were generating in the past maybe would sit in our pipeline untouched for 6 months or more.
Wow. But
now we're generating opportunities and we're following them up straight away. We are booking executive briefings on average. There's 10 executive briefings booked every week by Paul.
That's amazing.
Which means I can have up to 6 a day, whereas let's say in the past, sometimes I wouldn't have even done one a month, depending on how busy I was. So in terms of
how hungry you were.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if I was doing other things, because obviously, as the business owner, I do get involved in other things as well. But I am now much more focused on the sales side of things, and I can do many executive briefings, as I say, 10 a week rather than one a month.
Yeah. So things must be different from the prospect's perspective, because they're getting an email offering them the book. They respond. They get sent the book, obviously fairly promptly, and that triggers an autoresponder sequence. In fact, if they don't request the book, there's an autoresponder sequence that pings them multiple times, repeating the offer until they do, or unsubscribe.
Yep.
And if they do request the book, that also triggers an autoresponder sequence selling the executive briefing. Plus, of course, Paul is following them up, hustling them to schedule it. So there's quite a difference in activity from the prospect's perspective.
Yep.
Talk about flow. What sort of numbers are we talking about at each step in that process?
What sort of numbers do we have? Right. Okay. So I think when we started the process, I think we were most worried about generating opportunities. In fairness, I think when we started, we had 55 opportunities. We had 0 executive briefings. We had no solution design workshops. And we had 2 contracts sitting there waiting. Now we have over 200 opportunities. We have 22 executive briefings, typically around that. 22 just happens to be what we have at the moment, but it's been up to 25.
And this, let me jump in.
We don't want to book them too far in advance.
This is 22. So it's, I think the 200 opportunities are 200 opportunities that are open right now. And when you say 22 executive briefings, you mean 22 executive briefings sitting there waiting to be done?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And solution design workshops?
Difference. Yep. The solution design workshops, I think I've got 3 sitting there waiting to be done again.
Okay. Excellent. So there's quite a pipeline.
Sorry, Justin. Hold on a minute. I've just got can I just...
No problem. Go for it.
I'll be back.
Andy is actually at his holiday home in France. I'll ask him where in France when he comes back. But if you're wondering about the architecture, that's why.
Sorry, Justin.
I was just saying, Andy, that you're at your holiday house in France?
Yeah, because this is a little experiment for me, which is I'm going to be trying to... I'm doing my executive briefings here from France. So whereas in the past I would be leaving my family in the house and travelling back to the UK to doing different meetings, my experiment is to see if I can carry on working by doing executive briefings out here in France.
So is that the south of France?
It's the Loire, actually. So the middle, I suppose.
The middle. Do you know who Bill Wyman is?
Yeah.
Can you tell our
Rolling Stone? Right?
Can you tell our American viewers who may not be as familiar with the Rolling Stones why I'm asking you that question? I'll give you a hint.
I'm not sure why you're asking.
I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the finest. Actually, it wasn't a Rolling Stones song at all. It was a Bill Wyman song. He went out on his own and recorded a song called "Je suis a rockstar." You don't remember that?
Yeah, I do. I'm sad enough to remember that.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't heard it, you might want to go to YouTube. It was fairly comical. It was called "Je suis un rockstar," and he talked about how he had a residence in France. And it was a song that he sung half in English and half in fake French.
Yep.
Probably not his finest hour, but it's funny nonetheless.
Absolutely. So sorry about that.
That's the lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, it is an experiment. It's yet to be proved, Justin, but I'm pretty confident. I mean, I've done, I'm doing a couple of exec briefings most days, so.
While you're there.
And meanwhile, Paul's back in the UK busily booking up more for me. So
that's excellent. That's excellent. I mean, it must be, your wife would probably rather you were doing none, but it must be nice to be on vacation and know that, the pipeline is filling up and opportunities are progressing even while you're away.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Better than being on
Absolutely.
vacation.
And it's, yeah, and we've got all the opportunities being managed in the various bits of software, so we can track to make sure the number of calls are being done, to make sure that the opportunities are flowing. So I can track all of that from my house. And I think the other useful thing is that that the follow-ups from the executive briefings, which in the past we may not have been so good at, Paul's picking up on them and we're following them through. So he's taking ownership for the opportunity, and it's flowing through to the end.
I mentioned Frances before. I guess Frances is in the campaign coordinator role.
She is, yeah.
And she was there before, but I think she was doing a mix of campaign coordination, but also jumping on the phone and trying to do some telephone work at the same time.
A little bit of jumping on the phone, but I don't think we were so keen on jumping on the phone. But
okay.
But I think it's given us, and given her in particular, a renewed focus, and she's really enjoyed the work with you guys. It's given her a new new lease of life to a certain degree. It's really motivated her.
Great.
So she can see how important the role is. And
so I know Daniel Pines, one of our consultants, has been working closely with Frances, and you mentioned technology. I think you guys have implemented Mautic, which is a marketing automation application with Salesforce there.
Yep.
And I'm guessing Daniel's been training her how to use it, and all of the preliminary activities, sending the email campaigns out, managing the autoresponders, capturing the email addresses with the landing page and so on, all of that's being done in Mautic.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on that, Justin, I'd just like to say. But yeah, Frances and Daniel have been working on that, and that's all working. So the fact that, maybe I don't know enough about that is just testament to the fact that it's working fine. So I haven't really got to be involved in that.
Yeah, I've glanced at it a couple of times, and it looks like it's running like clockwork. The landing pages and the emails and everything look pretty schmick. It looks fantastic, actually.
Yeah, no, they're all working good. They're all working fine.
Yeah, okay. So talk to me about where from here.
Where from here? Well, at the moment we're still there's still some things to finish off. So at the moment we're focused on the gold. So all the campaigns have been for the gold. So obviously, as I said before, our other offering is from project management side of things. So we need to create the same email responders, the same landing pages, all of that good stuff for critical chain. So that's definitely something that we're going to be doing. And the other thing is we're upgrading our website as well. So they're the two big initiatives I think that we've got on. And I think from our perspective is just carry on doing more of the same. I mean, you can always improve, and we're gradually improving on the scripts, on the things to say. I've had a number of executive briefings recently, which are ones that I would hope we could have maybe made some improvement on the phone call and checked out some information, so it would have given me a better steer. So we're just adding a few little tweaks to that so that we can prepare me better for those EBs, I think.
Okay. How do you, out of curiosity, you're giving away a whole copy of the book. How do you handle people who you talk to who haven't read the goal yet?
Yeah, that's a challenge. We get lots of people who say, "Oh yes, yeah, I've got it. Thanks very much, but I haven't got around to reading it yet." So one of the things that we try to work on is to say, "Great, we're really glad you're interested in it," and rather than you take the next 3-4 weeks or maybe 6 months to read it, if you go on a 40-minute executive briefing with Andy, he'll outline the concepts for you. would save you reading it or encourage you to read it. Also, the autoresponders, to a certain degree, do try to encourage people to read it by saying, if you've got to chapter 4 by now, blah, blah, blah. But so we're doing those two things, really. So we're either trying to say to them on the call, don't worry about reading it, go on the exec briefing, or we're trying to push them on the autoresponders to read it.
And do you find when if people have scheduled an executive briefing with you, do you find that they will have gone to some effort to read at least some of the book before they talk to you, or do you find yourself talking to people who haven't read a single page?
I've done that, yeah. I sometimes talk to people who haven't read a single page, yeah. Although I would say more often than not, the people that I am speaking to are people that have read it, if I'm honest.
Okay. And how big an impact does reading the book have on whether or not they're going to go ahead and schedule or request a proposal, at least for a solution design workshop?
I'd like to say not much, but that wouldn't be true. I think they've still got to have. I've either encouraged them enough on the executive briefing to have read it, or they've read it in the past. I'm not sure I can think of anyone who's gone to a solution design workshop who hasn't read the book by the time we've got to the workshop.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because it's such a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift is sold so well on the book. I'd be very surprised if you could sell it to someone skeptical on the phone who hadn't read a page. Yeah.
So I'd like to say that, but in reality, I think everybody who goes on the solution design workshop has read it.
Okay, terrific. So that's been great. What I'd like to do before we finish is we have a lot of clients, as you know, here in the US and the UK and Australia too, who are manufacturers or distributors who stock or handle physical products. Let's talk about a manufacturer first. If you could give someone a few pieces of advice or a few watch outs, what would be the default advice that you would give to a manufacturer if they wanted to improve flow?
Okay, so if they wanted to improve flow, obviously manufacturer is quite a broad thing, so it does depend if they're an assembly or a process plant. So there's a lot of differences between the two, but essentially understand either what's your real the real blockage to flow overall, just consistently. If you tell me it moves all the time, then basically that's very simply down to the way you release material or the way you're dictated to by the marketplace, which means you don't have a constraint in effect. If it's the same thing all of the time, then it's a case of, right, well, how often does it actually work, and how often does it work on the right things? So if you can identify a piece of equipment or an area, then focus on that area and see if you can squeeze more capacity from that by basically making sure that it works all the time and making sure it works on the right stuff. Typically, in my experience, even though I walk around the factory lots and lots of times and people will say to me, that's the constraint. And I say, well, that piece of machinery or that assembly line that's not working, because it's amazing how often it doesn't work. Even though people know that it's the constraint, they still seem to accept it never working. Yeah, which is quite a miracle to me.
Yeah, I've detected almost a bizarre pride sometimes when people will say that, see that machine over there, that's our constraint, and I look and it's not working. People are almost proud of it. It's shocking.
Yeah, it's very strange. I can't imagine. I don't understand it.
Okay. So if the plant is chaotic and the constraint is shifting all over the place, then you mentioned something, but it slipped by very quickly. I think you were suggesting you would choke the release.
I mean, effectively, the key things to do are choke the release. So release the work at the rate at which the constraint can work, or if there's an absence of a constraint, release the work in line with the market demand and a buffer time before that. And then you effectively manage that through using what we would typically say as buffer management, which is a time-related buffer, which is either which over time it moves from green to yellow to red, which gives it obviously higher and higher priority to management and to the people on the shop floor. So we're trying to basically what we're trying to do is synchronize the shop floor around either a single area or synchronize it around the market, and gaining that synchronization helps the overall effectiveness of the plant.
So if it's chaotic and the constraints moving all over the place, the first thing you would do is tie the release of work to the completion of work at the other end.
Yep.
And that would make it easier to determine what the limiting resource was within the plant.
Yes, which many times nowadays you actually find the limiting resource is actually people, which makes it more tricky because people have downsized quite a lot and therefore have been really, let's say, leaner, and they've cut back a bit too far, so that actually it's people that rather than equipment that's the constraint.
It's not a person in particular, it's just labour in general.
Yes, in general, that tends to be the case in many environments. Yeah.
So in that case, you have to convince them to get more bodies into the plant.
Not necessarily more bodies, because we're trying to find the hidden capacity first of all. So again, they tend to do things that waste the capacity of the people that they do have.
I see.
So maybe you're overmaking, maybe you're not moving the people to the right areas. That's what we tend to see. So they leave people in certain areas for longer than they need to.
I see. So even though the plant may be under-resourced, they may have addressed the lack of capacity by trying to boost local efficiencies, which would lead to them perhaps overmaking.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. And what about a project environment?
In a project environment, almost without fail, there's too many projects in that environment. So unlike in manufacturing, even the worst companies have learned their lesson many years ago, and they know that if you release too much work, there's too many queues, lead time goes up, delivery performance suffers. In a project environment, we take no notice of that in most cases, and it's just, this is another great project, we must do it, I must have capacity, let's release it. So there's almost always too many projects. So one of the first things we need to do is prioritize them and agree which projects we're going to temporarily put on hold, so the other ones will go faster. Once we do that, what we then look at is how we can plan that project at the right level of granularity. So we're planning for flow. I'm not trying to manage everybody's diary and manage the nth degree. We're just trying to manage the tasks at a high enough level that really is going to give us a good enough plan to execute against. People tend to get confused with projects from a planning perspective. They call it planning, but it's in execution. So there's a distinct difference between a plan and execution. In the project environment, we accept the fact that we make a plan and it will be wrong and will change. What we want to do is in critical chain environments say, let's make a good enough plan that's plans for the flow, and then we execute against that plan.
Yeah, so the focus is so we're more likely to fix something in execution than we are to try and plan at a more granular level.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I think actually the first time I met you in the UK, it was with a joint client. I think we'd managed to win a client that was also a client of yours, and you guys were working with them on replenishment, I believe.
Yep, that's right. So we're working with them on more frequent replenishment of smaller amounts.
So that's an interesting one. I think we both have a lot of clients that are sort of buy-sell. They're distributors or some variation, or resellers. How often do you see bad practices in procurement or purchasing?
How often do I not see bad practices? Justin would be better. It's amazing how many people would prefer their cash tied up in inventory that doesn't move, which is quite surprising, because it's like, this is 20% cheaper if I buy 10,000 of them, and I only want 100. It's like, wow, brilliant. But it'll take you the next 100 years to sell 10,000, but they don't seem to care. It's very surprising. What that actually does for their suppliers as well is it destroys capacity for suppliers. So the education process in replenishment is interesting, because you educate the procurement guys, and then you go out to the suppliers and you educate the suppliers to say, why on earth are you offering discounts to destroy your capacity?
Yeah.
What you want to be doing is offering discounts for people to give you smaller orders or give you the ability to make during times when you are a low when you have low volume.
So let's talk about the supplier side, because that's interesting. They're giving discounts for the customers to buy in bulk. That means they're making their orders lumpier, so they're having to
Yep.
ship large quantities of stuff, which seems to be a better idea. Except it I'm assuming upstream it means it impacts their availability.
And it impacts their availability, and also what it does for the supplier is it impacts their lead time. So they spend. So because the orders are lumpy, then the supplier lead time increases and increases, which means they may only see that order again in a year's time, rather than they could
So
see
they
the
have,
order for the same amount every month.
yeah, and they have worse business intelligence because it takes them longer to detect changes in the marketplace.
Absolutely, yeah.
So they're dealing with a bigger batch size, which I guess means they're forced to stock a smaller range, and they have and the feedback from the marketplace is delayed because customers are holding large inventories of these products that they're promoting.
Absolutely, and what they do is they push everything to the people who are nearest the market. So actually, the suppliers are so far away from what's happening, because there may be 2 or 3 chains.
So for the supplier, it's a self, what's the expression, self-supporting cycle or self-deprecating cycle. Those promotions are going to become like a heroin addiction for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
They'll need to run more promotions and offer more aggressive prices just to shift inventory to customers who don't need it.
Yep. Sounds like a very interesting strategy. Lower my prices, sell things to people that don't need them, who can't sell them. Yeah.
Yeah, and cut off the feedback from the marketplace that would enable me to plan better.
Yep.
Okay.
And destroy my capacity internally by using my internal capacity for things that no one wants. Yep.
Yeah, and because I'm short of space and short of cash, I can't stock the range of products that I would have stocked otherwise.
Correct.
Sounds like you're optimizing your way out of business. So from the customer's perspective, the buyer's perspective, what advice are you giving to the procurement team?
So to the procurement team, the advice generally to begin with is first of all understand what sells and understand how fast that it moves, and understand how to set your inventory level. So an inventory level is what's your demand over the replenishment period, and what's the maximum demand. Lots of people like to work on averages, which means I'm self-fulfilling the fact that I'm always going to be short if I work on an average. So we're saying set the right level, and as soon as you sell one, trigger a replenishment of that. So it's much more frequent replenishment of smaller batches.
So it's kind of like your approach to production. With production, you were saying, well, we're tying the release of raw material to the purchasing of new products at the other end of the line. Here you're saying we're tying the ordering of new inventory to the consumption of inventory by the plant.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so it's basically...
The other thing in a plant-wise, we would keep the inventory closer to the plant. So we would actually... if our manufacturers are supplying wholesalers or retailers, then we would encourage the retailer actually to buy less straight away. So we would try to sell in smaller amounts but sell more frequently as well. So we'd rather them stock a larger range with us and smaller amounts, which we would replenish much more frequently, and then we aggregate. We benefit from aggregation by holding more inventory in our warehouse on site.
Okay, interesting. So I'm guessing if you add this all up, if you work with the manufacturer to replenish in smaller quantities more frequently, you work with their suppliers to get them to adopt similar behaviors. You work with the plant to tie the release of raw materials to the, I guess this is what lean people would call takt time, the rate at which stuff's being consumed by the market. across the board, the impacts have got to be fairly significant for the manufacturer.
Absolutely massive, yeah. Absolutely massive. So, yeah, you can easily have a huge impact on sales, and I'm talking, 50% increase in sales. Lead times typically tumble. So, in our cases, one of our clients' lead times was 16 weeks, and it went down to 2. So this is what you can do by destroying the big batch mentality, and inventory just typically reduces, halves. So my cash suddenly gets freed up, which is always quite interesting. While some of your clients say, "Well, my bank account's going through the roof with the amount of cash that we're making."
Yeah.
It's not that sales have gone up dramatically. It's that they're not necessarily making stuff that they don't need.
Yeah. So the next step, I guess, for these businesses is to do the same thing in sales.
Absolutely, yeah.
It'll be. We've had a few. Well, we've had quite a few, I think, TOC firms that have implemented our methodology in sales. But I think it'd be great to have a standout example of somebody who did the whole process from end to end. Sales, replenishment, production.
Yep.
It'd be exciting to see.
No, absolutely.
Well, this has been a great story. I'm excited for you. I know you're excited.
Yeah, and I think it's early days. We should do a part 2, really, Justin, in a year's time or something. After we've really, we've only been at this for 4 months in reality. So.
Yeah, I gave our team a bit of a hard time at one point. I said to them, look, because they'd been working away on, the new email and new landing page, and they were putting all this together. And I said to them, you better get this into the marketplace and run these things. What if they don't work? So it was great. And actually, when it came down to it, I think you were pressuring Daniel to do the mailing in large batches. And I was, when it came down to it, I said, look, you better not, because what if we get overwhelmed with book requests? And I think he made a mistake, as is often the case with the email broadcast, and he ended up sending it to the whole batch.
He did. He did, yeah.
Which Francis probably worried about. I suspect you secretly weren't that concerned.
No, we weren't that concerned. No, it was fine. I think it's amazing how your assumptions. I think one interesting thing for us is Francis was really worried about would she be able to generate the number of opportunities that we need to support this. That was her, let's say, unverbalized fear, although she did actually verbalize it.
Yes.
To me. But so far, it hasn't been a problem, which has surprised us.
And we haven't actually done. I think we're running the email campaign and the landing page we started with. We haven't had to go back and revise. At some point, maybe we should. So, and we've only used one promotional medium. I think sending emails to rented or purchase lists. That's all we've done.
Yep.
There's been no pay-per-click, no print media, no TV, nothing. Just email campaigns.
Yep. So there's plenty more up our sleeve.
Tons. I mean, we've been doing this in the US, exactly the process that you have for about 8 years, aggressively. I think when I came here for the first couple of years, we had beginner's luck, and also the financial crisis hit. So nothing happened there for a little while. But for 8 years, we've been running experiments in different media and aggressively testing different things. So you've got all that ahead of you still.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very exciting. What impact, if any, has it had on your team of consultants, this whole process?
I think let's give them, obviously they're a bit busier than they were. They've been quite involved with the solution design workshop side of things, which has been good. But I think overall I think it's generally motivated them that we're doing something about the constraint of our business, really.
Excellent. Yeah, it must be nice for them to see the flow of the size of the pipeline behind them.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
But it's closing the. Yeah, no. That as I say, it's obviously you need to close the deals as well. But I think the pipeline's better than it's ever been by a long, long way. I've been keeping a record of it every week, so we can see how it's been growing and how it's been flowing. So I think it's useful data to look back on.
So let me ask a provocative question, and those who are in the TOC world will know why this is provocative. If you're having a drink with another TOC consultant and you say to them, "How's things?" and they say, "Oh, mate, the constraints in the market, isn't it?" How are you responding now?
I still think. How am I responding? I'd like to say the constraint wasn't in the market, but I'm intentionally I want to keep the constraint in the market anyway. So I will grow the team to keep the constraint in the market.
So in your business, where's the constraint?
At the moment, the constraint is still probably with me, if I'm honest. I'm still the thing that's constraining the business. So I do solution design workshops. I do, as I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, I've changed the process slightly to after the EB, I tend to go and do a visit to the company. I don't go straight for the workshop. I go for a visit, then a solution design workshop. So I'm still the constraint of the business. And when I'm really the constraint and my diary is absolutely fully loaded with EBs and visits, I will drop the visit or try to drop the visit. So we'll just do solution design workshop.
Get the consultant to do it.
And I'll get the consultant to do that, and I'll get the consultant to do the solution design workshop on their own as well, eventually. So that I will stop myself from becoming the constraint. But at the moment, I'd say it's probably still, overall, it's a combination between me and the market. But we're heading in the right direction that we're solving that.
Yeah, so let me challenge you on that. If you sell one deal, if you sell a couple of deals a month, your deals obviously span multiple months. Delivery spans multiple months. I'm guessing the constraint at some point is going to shift to your consulting team. You're going to have projects queued up in front of them.
Yeah, and that's what what I would like to do is get a buffer in front of them, but also my consulting team has mentioned a number of times to me that we're going to have to change this pretty soon because it's going to shift to us. Yeah.
So I would say, the way we run our business is to try and maintain our consulting team as the constraint. We would love to have one or two engagements at all times waiting to launch upstream from our consulting team at the same time, of course, that we're adding consultants to the team. Because that's, of course, if our bench is empty, if all of our consultants are fully utilized working with clients, that's when we make the most money.
Yep, absolutely.
How long until you hit that point?
Summer's not the greatest time, so if it wasn't for summer, if it wasn't for the next month, being August, where there's lots of holidays, I think this does have an effect on getting to people. I would say by October, I'll be hitting that point.
Yeah.
November.
I think that's where you want to be, Andy.
Yep.
One thing that we found, and you may find this too, is that if you do the calculations in Excel, you figure out what your capacity is. For us, it's 4 engagements per consultant. And theoretically, it would be nice to have a constraint buffer. In other words, a queue of projects that haven't, or engagements for us that haven't started yet. But the interesting thing that we found is because we're growing, every time we bring a new consultant on, we can't give them 4 engagements immediately. It takes them 6 months working on just one before they can start to take on a second and a third. So, and there's a fair bit of elasticity there. So if we have maybe at any one point in time 2 consultants who are at different points in the onboarding process, we have a lot of elasticity to give them their second engagement sooner or later, or their third engagement sooner or later. There's actually a huge amount of elasticity in the rate at which we fill up those new consultants. So we've discovered we don't really need to have a queue of engagements waiting in the wings in order to keep our constraint fully loaded at all times.
Okay.
We can simply regulate how aggressively we load up new consultants.
Okay. Interesting.
Now, if we did it too aggressively, quality would suffer, and also we would have consultants having nervous breakdowns. So we're leery about doing that. But it seems to be that at least while we're growing, we can kind of there's actually a buffer there, even though we couldn't go and point to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. No, I definitely want to be there, Justin, too. So,
excellent. Well,
I think 3 months.
I hope some other
TNC
TNC consultants and maybe consultants from other areas too listen to this, just to prove that these ideas do work in a consulting practice.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely work.
I get asked that question all the time: do these ideas work in a consulting practice? And I say to them, well, yes, actually, I have one. But of course, people say, well, aside from yours, of course, do they work in a consulting practice?
Yep.
So
absolutely they do.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about you is that, and I don't know why, but the typical consultant's response is, well, aside from yours, Justin, and you had the opposite approach, Andy. You said, well, if they work in your practice, I just want to copy what you're doing exactly. And it was a refreshing approach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Well, congratulations on what you've done.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
House in France now, maybe the Amalfi Coast next time.
No, maybe not. I'm quite happy in the Loire, the vineyards, and it's a nice part of France.
Excellent. Well done.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
Thanks so
for
much,
your time.
Andy. All the best.
Thank you.